Welcome to Red Clay This Month, the show that brings light to important educational issues that affect students in the Red Clay Consolidated School District here in Wilmington, Delaware. I'm Dr. Judith Conway. I am the Supervisor of Unified Arts here in Red Clay, and I will be your host for this show. Now, Goal 1 of our strategic plan is to increase achievement through a foundation of high-quality elementary instruction. On today's show, we're going to delve into what that means and how we will get there. So let's jump right in. Please welcome Dr. Amy Grundy, who is the Director of Elementary Education here at Red Clay. Welcome, Amy. Hi, I am so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Happy
to be here.
Ah, good. Well, listen, we're talking about Goal 1.
Yep.
Of the strategic plan, and through Goal 1 we want to help our students increase their achievement. So what do you think are the most important areas for us to focus on in order to do that, and what can we do to make students continuously improve to be successful?
First and foremost, I think the most important area of Goal 1 is strengthening Tier 1 instruction across our district. And to do that,
Tier 1 instruction is kind of like the instruction for everybody.
Yep.
Yeah.
And to do that, we have to make sure that we provide a guaranteed experience for every student. So curricular materials that are consistent across the district. Best practices that our administrators and teachers are familiar with and have experienced professional development in, so that they can implement them across the district. So our students really, regardless of who their teacher is.
Best practices, you mean like best teaching practices?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So instructional strategies that will truly get at the core of what kids need to know and help them to know it. And so
no matter where you go.
Exactly. No matter which teacher you have, which classroom, in which school, we're providing a guaranteed experience. Now, certainly teachers have their own styles and have their own strategies that they use, but at the foundation are the consistent curriculum materials and the best practices that our staff are familiar with across the district. And then we have to be sure that our administrators are at district level and also in the building level are able to support teachers, because there is no more important person in the educational system than a really good teacher. And so we have to make sure that we have great teachers in every single classroom, and we have people who can support them to continually grow and get better, because teaching, learning, education, it's always evolving. And so it's important that we stay current in best practices and that we support our teachers in staying current in best practices as well. And so probably the most important part of Goal 1 is that classroom instruction that all students receive, first and foremost. Then there's several layers beyond that, but that's critically important. All of our elementary schools this year and our secondary schools, as a matter of fact, have school plans, continuous school improvement plans, where they've identified priorities, and these priorities are tightly aligned to our district strategic plan. And so teaching and learning, strong foundation for all kids is a top priority across all our schools.
Right, because that's really what makes the difference. What happens right there at that student's desk.
Absolutely.
You know, what tasks they're being asked to do, and you're right. So when we talk about best practices, it's things like, you know, not just asking what I used to call right there questions,
Correct.
but asking kids questions that require them to think, like for an example of a best practice.
Correct. And then we have evolving curriculum materials. Recently, new math curriculum, and we are in the transition to new English language arts curriculum across our grade levels. And I think as we get these new materials, they will lend themselves to teachers really supporting students with rigorous instruction.
Absolutely. Now, we're using several measures to gauge our success. Let's focus on that literacy piece of it, because I think a lot of people would agree that unless you can read, a lot of the other things are very, very difficult to absorb and to learn. So I know we use several measures to gauge our success with literacy, so can you share like what the data is showing?
Yeah, so in Goal 1 is really centered on kindergarten through 5th grade. And so we have several measures Well, to specifically answer your question, we are trending up. So our data is looking positive. However,
yay.
it's more important beyond district-wide data to look at school data, to look at cell group data, so different cells of students, like our special education students, how are they doing? Different ethnicity groups, to make sure that if we have gaps, that we're addressing those gaps. And so most importantly is that teachers and administrators do a great job of digging deep into the data and actually looking at individual student data and put a face to that data so that they know what individual students need and they can tailor instruction to individual student needs. Part of Goal 1 is in grades kindergarten through 3, we're shifting our grading practices to be more standards-based. And so as we continue to grow and get better at doing that, we'll have lots of information about individual students, which standards they have mastered or are really good at and where the gaps lie, and then how to fill those gaps. And students will be familiar with what they can do well and the areas that they're working on. So part of the goal, again, is that shift in grading practices with a vision of accurate grades and motivated learners. And I think when you have motivated learners who know their strengths and know where their gaps are, then they'll be eager to set goals around that and fill those gaps. And so the information provided by our gradebook program in grades K through 3 progress book, as teachers get more familiar, because it's relatively new, they will be able to take advantage of such specific data that program helps to provide to inform what they do with individual students, small groups of students, and the entire class. And principals and assistant principals can use it to see trends across the school and help inform how they structure a school day to intervene on behalf of kids.
Excellent, excellent. So we're using, in K through 3 especially, we're using standards-based information. And 4 and 5?
So yes, all teachers have, all grades have, and all content areas have standards to which teachers align their instruction. So with regard to grading practices, grades 4 and 5 are using a more traditional approach, however, very cognizant of measuring learning and not just compliance, like completing homework, but really looking at the standards, the assignments that kids are completing, and then assessing learning versus just behaviors. And so fair grading practices will be a focus in 4th and 5th grade, but K5, K12, there's standards that teachers use to guide instruction and inform what kids need to know and be able to do.
Yeah. So what are the plans for continuing this work? I mean, I know in terms of there are several strategies for strengthening goal number 1, which is academic excellence for our K-5 students. So what are we doing, what are some of those strategies and how are we working them?
Sure, so we have one-to-one technology in many of our 2nd through 12, I do believe it is. And so technology has been a big focus, making sure that we support teachers in using technology at several levels, whether it be just replacing pen and paper to allow kids to interact with a device, to providing experiences that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do without the technology. So technology moving forward is definitely a critical component of enhancing the experiences that we provide for students, and it is part of Goal 1 that kids have access to technology to support teaching and learning. It's a great tool also for intervention because you can target certain instruction to exactly what a student needs based on some of the programs that we have available for students, and teachers can kind of pinpoint what it is and have kids work on specific targeted schools. So technology is a great tool that's going to help us moving forward.
Right, in this what you were just talking about in terms of, I know I'm strong in this standard and this standard, and I know this is a gap for me, this other standard, so now technology can step in, of course with the guidance of my teacher, to make sure I'm working on things that will improve my performance on that particular standard that I need a little more work in.
Right, and to be real, kids enjoy working on a computer for the most part. And so it's also another challenge teachers have, is to identify how kids learn best. But if it is, in fact, using technology part of the day, because it's also critical that we have opportunities for kids to interact on a personal level as well. But so it gives more options for planning for instruction to meet individual student needs. Across the learning spectrum, Goal 1 is committed to supporting students. So we have talented and gifted services that we provide for students, intervention for students who need intervention. And so we're very cognizant of making sure that we meet individual student needs, because it's one size fits all. It's not how we operate, and it's not how we're going to move the needle on our data. So data is critically important. It's never just one test score. It's standardized tests. It's classroom and curriculum-based assessments. It's assignments. It's listening and interacting with students to see what they know. So there's multiple measures to see how we're doing. And so while we do often get judged, if you will, on our smarter balance results, there's so many opportunities to see where kids are excelling, where kids are growing, and then also where we need to provide extra support, and that's all okay.
Well, it sounds like that we really are taking a multifaceted view
Absolutely.
of academic achievement, and that all means all.
It does. It
From
does.
the gifted and talented to the kids who are high academic achievers, to the kids that are medium academic achievers, to the kids who struggle with academic achievement.
And all kids excel at something, so it's so
Exactly.
critical that we are focused. We have language opportunities for some of our young learners in immersion programs. We have one school, William C. Lewis, that's completely dedicated to dual language, and we have Strand programs. We have Mandarin at Linden Hill that's offered, and Spanish right now at Marbrook and Moat. And so opportunities for kids who want to become bilingual at a young age, which also will contribute to their success in comprehension and fluency and all the critical skills.
Oh yeah, there's so many studies out there that point to being bilingual. Earlier the better, and what good practice, what good muscle building it is for the brain. You know, and I certainly would be remiss if I didn't mention the arts as far as that was concerned as well, in terms of building kids' ability to focus and the joy of creating, and looking at things from different perspectives.
And just a matter of providing opportunities. The strong foundation for our young learners is across the board, because we want kids to come to school, to love school, to be motivated to learn. And so the more opportunities we provide, the arts, the language, different forms of instruction, the bigger the hook will be for kids. And that way, when they get older and we've achieved our goal of all kids reading fluently and being strong comprehenders by grade 3, that then they can really use their reading ability and their strong academic foundation to then become critical thinkers and problem solvers and solve the problems of the world.
Right, literally, literally.
Yep.
You know, going out and contributing to whatever community they're a part of.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In a real thoughtful and informed way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, students, we do this because we believe that they are, that they all have promise, and that they all are the future, and it's critical that we prepare them for the future. And again, we've talked about this in our meetings and in professional development, that we don't really even understand or know the future that we're preparing them for. So we have to make sure, in addition to academic skills, that they do have critical thinking skills and problem solving skills, and just anything that's going to help them to be productive citizens in a global society that we don't even know what it's going to look like yet. So it's a big task. Big
It is
job,
a big
but I think
task.
we're up for it.
I think we are.
Yeah, we
I
continue
think
to
we
work
are.
and grow. So
And it takes it takes all of us.
it does. It does.
Absolutely, from just all walks of what we do here. Feeding kids good, healthy, nutritious lunches, making sure they're safe on the bus, making sure the buildings are clean, the lights are on,
And I just have to add that having a plan is so critical. So our strategic plan is critical. My father was a huge Yogi Berra fan, and one of my favorite quotes was, "If you don't know where you're going, you might end up somewhere else." And I think that we have very clear goals, we know where we're going, and we have a plan to get there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Amy,
you.
for
Yeah.
coming and talking and chatting with us today. And
My pleasure.
I hope you found it interesting as well. And stay tuned for our next guest as we continue to explore today's topic.
Awkward. Do I look familiar? I should. You might remember me from here. Here. Or maybe even here.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
It can actually be a perfect moment to reach out to a friend and ask if they're okay if they seem down.
It doesn't matter how you say it.
You all right?
Everything's okay?
All G?
You all right, girl? You cool?
You bugging dog.
Just show you're there for them.
Go on, Kelly. Seize the awkward.
Hey, you haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
Welcome back to Red Clay This Month, where we're talking about student literacy. And who better to talk about student literacy than our Supervisor of English Language Arts, Dr. Gaysha Badley. Please join me in welcoming her. Well, hey, Gaysha.
How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we're talking about literacy. Now, some people see that word literacy and they think just reading. What do you think? Does literacy encompass more than that?
Literacy definitely encompasses a lot more than reading. Really, truly, literacy is the big umbrella. And so I think probably maybe an easy way to think of it, you got under the big umbrella, you got two buckets. And in one bucket, you've got reading, and then the other bucket, you have writing. However, those are kind of our big kind of content areas that we kind of usually typically think about. But one thing that we know that Common Core has really brought to us is that we need to think about some of the other pieces with literacy. And so now we also have speaking and listening that falls under there as well. But I think what's really kind of important to think about, and especially when you're thinking about the job that an elementary teacher has to do, is then now we need to kind of dig a little bit deeper into each one of those buckets. So really, reading, that's a big word, but reading encompasses phonics, phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and both phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, that's dealing with sounds and understanding and representing the sounds in words. Then you move from there, you go to phonics, and then that's where you're really kind of teaching kids to learn how to decode or to read. And then after that, you've got comprehension. So that's all under reading, and that could take a full day right there. And then you've got writing, and then writing, really you're thinking about the writing process, the traits of writing, how to take a story from beginning to the end, but then you also then have grammar. And then, like I said, at Common Core, what they've really brought to us to know that, you know what, we're preparing our students to really be ready for college and career. And what do we do quite often, as we're doing today? We're speaking and listening.
Right,
so that's
right.
also another, those are other two big areas that fall under the whole literacy umbrella.
So we're really talking four distinct skills, if you will, which each encompass multiple mini skills underneath.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, you know, our strategic goal number one really focuses on elementary, and I know one of the things we've said is for every child to be reading by grade 3. Why is that so important? That early literacy, that we've made that a goal.
The early years are truly the crucial years, especially when we're talking about literacy development. One thing that research has really shared with us that we've learned through the data is that students, if they don't have those foundational skills by third grade, and we haven't filled the gap, it'll be extremely hard to fill that gap after third grade. And reason being is because typically, once you move to that third grade year, you're switching your gear, and now you're reading to learn. In those younger grades, we often say that that's where you're learning to read. So grades K through 2, you're learning to read. You're not dealing with as much of the complex text, and so you're really just trying to get that task of the skill of reading down. Now after that, once we move to third, fourth, and on up, now you're really using reading as a vehicle to learn content and vocabulary, and across the various different content areas. So that's why it's so important that we make sure that we really provide a strong foundation for all of our students. And I I really feel like we're going to start seeing research where that change, we're going to have a shift. It's no longer going to be third grade, and I think it's going to probably be a little bit sooner than that. And reason being is because our standards have gotten more rigorous, and so the expectations have shifted. And so I really feel like we really need to get those things done and kind of get them into place by K1 and maybe by beginning to middle of second grade. And then after that, the expectations for students in second grade now look like what they used to be in third grade. So really those early grade and truly even before kindergarten. So that's why we have a big push for preschool and pre-K. But those are so really from birth to grade 2, I would say is really our crucial years.
In terms of, I'm thinking very early years, the amount of time that people talk to a child, the kinds of conversation that the child hears, the kind of words that the child hears, sitting and having lap time, not nap time or app time, but real lap time where you're sitting and reading and pointing, to things in the pictures and things like that. So really right from those experiences on through second grade to get all that decoding and laying the foundation for comprehension.
Absolutely, it's amazing the oral language development that happens in those early years, and the importance of introducing students to books right from the womb. You're teaching them some very early on concept of print types of skills where they actually learn how a book is put together. They know the front of the book versus the back of the book. They know that we read and we can have pictures and we can read from the pictures and we also can read from the words. Those are things that we can teach our children before they have to learn what a letter is. And before they know that a letter represents a sound. And those are really, really important early literacy skills that if they come into kindergarten already having those things in place, then the kindergarten teacher can take that and move forward. So that's why and that's a nationwide push, is why we really hear a lot for the need for having pre-K and available for all of our children.
That makes a lot of sense to me because, lots of times children go to daycare until they're ready for, until they're old enough for school. So having something really healthy and helpful in preschool makes a big difference. Now, I know we have some new reading materials and curriculum that we've introduced, so can you tell us a little bit about those new curricular materials and why they were selected?
Yes. So the new curriculum that we selected for grades K through 5, excuse me, the name of it is Ready Gen. It's a Pearson product, and we went through a pretty rigorous evaluation of curricula to determine that this was the best fit for us. And so it really took about, I would say, maybe about 3 years that went from the beginning of the process to the end. Just to kind of share a little bit of how the process works. Publishing companies love to send us materials.
Yes,
and
yes,
so
they do.
They love it. So when we knew that we were at the point where we wanted to look at some we were truly in need, not that we wanted, but we were in need of new curriculum. So I reached out to the various different.
If I recall, that was due to the. Our old curriculum not meeting the Common Core standards.
Correct.
And wasn't it discontinued as well? So
correct. Now we had double whammy. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then it got to the point where it almost was kind of like our kick in the butt a little bit. We said now enough is enough. We're going to have to get something new because no longer did teachers have access to the digital components of the program. We could no longer actually order replenishments of material. So we really knew we needed to get some things. Luckily, even before that push, I'd already started to do some beginning work to look at some new materials. And so I'd reached out to various different publishing companies and said, please send me what you have. So I was sitting in boxes and on top of boxes and weeding through.
Oh yes.
My suite mate, as you know.
Right. We share the same office suite, so I know those boxes.
Right, exactly. And elementary material, probably I would say of any other curriculum, comes with so much stuff.
Yeah.
So I started digging through and weeding through and just looking at various different pieces, and always with the Common Core in mind. And first and foremost, that does this material reach the rigor of the standard? Is it aligned? And I also use the EQUIP rubric, which is an assessment tool for looking at curriculum. And so I use that kind of side by side to say, okay, is this meeting our needs? So to just kind of abbreviate the process, once kind of looked through a lot of different materials, brought it down to just two different reading series. And then I brought that to our curriculum council, and I asked them for some feedback. I asked them to look at the different materials, got a lot of positive feedback for the two. So then we kind of did a larger let's look at, evaluate, and so I had teams of teachers representing all grade levels across the district, and we had tables set up where they could look at all of the materials. They too used the EQUIP rubric. We had the standards there, and we said, is this what we need? Will this meet the demand of the Common Core? Is it rigorous? Does it provide diversity for our students? Is there a range of text type, meaning that they have different genres that they're going to look at throughout the school year? So we looked at various different components. And I'm happy to say that grades K through 5 unanimously voted for Ready Gen.
Oh,
So,
very nice.
That is, I also will say that we don't always get that. So
Right. That's why I said,
right.
Because, we don't always get that.
We do not. So that has made the rollout of this a lot, I would say maybe even it just helps. It's when you know that this is something that teachers want.
Yeah.
So of course,
they're excited about it.
Exactly. And of course, like any curriculum, we're going to find some areas that we might still need to find some supplementing, making some shifts and thinking about instructionally what we need to do. But overall, we've been getting a lot of positive feedback from teachers, not only teachers, but students and parents, which has definitely been very, very positive.
So that's great. So you think that this new material is really helping us towards our goal of continuous improvement in terms of what's really happening at the child's desk and the kinds of materials that they're taking a look at.
I think so. Now we're in the very early stages. So
So who has the books? Who has the new curriculum now?
So this year is our first year district-wide where we have grades 4 through 5 using the new materials, and then we have a small pilot occurring for grades 2 through 3. Next year the plan is to do district-wide, grades 2 through 3. In fact, right before coming here, I just met with our pilot group for grades 2 and 3. And it's been great. We've had great conversations where this small group, they kind of are, we're looking at some kinks, some things that we need to change, some additional supports that are needed, so that we're feeling more confident when we move and implement this district-wide, that we'll be able to give teachers the resources and support that they need. And our hope is that we can continue that process so that grades K through 1, K and 1 will then be our next stage, and then the final phase of the rollout.
Nice. And you talk about teacher support, and I know, just because we are sweet mates, that that there's a lot of teacher support there, and that with the pilot that went on the year before this, this big rollout, that you've got experts in each building who have walked that road before, so that they can turn around and help somebody right in their building, so that help is never very far away if someone has a question. Of course, in addition to the district-wide professional development that I know you've done. So it sounds like we're really working hard through this lens to set kids up for success and to set teachers up for success with moving to these new, maybe more rigorous materials and questions that we're going to ask about the books they've read, and writing prompts that we're going to give them to write about the books they've read, and questions to discuss, trying to get reading and listening in.
That's right.
Right, to discuss the books they've read. So
absolutely. I think, and one thing, and this is what I shared with the teachers earlier today, that I appreciate that we had the opportunity to do this small pilot. Because it's one thing when you're evaluating materials by looking at them, and it's another thing when you're now putting them into action to see, what, I thought this was going to work a little bit, it was going to be a little bit smoother than what it was. So we were able to really truly have some conversations. We broke down each one of the components. They were able to share, you know, this is great. You know what, we don't even feel like we need this. Our students absolutely love these pieces. We feel like we want a little bit more. We talked about then what would PD look like for a teacher that's brand new.
Oh,
And
yeah,
this is the very first time that they're coming to the field, the teaching field, what kind of supports they will need versus a teacher that, you know what, they've been teaching, they're seasoned, okay, but now this is new curriculum, and then how does this shift from what they're used to? Because I think a lot of times we'll think of, oh, well, a new teacher, they won't, so they may need a lot more supports, but it's also something to think about for a teacher who's been doing this for a long time, because this curriculum is set up in a much different way than the curriculums that we've been using in the past. So they were able to kind of talk about that shift and how this, you know, the structure that this program is set up no longer is a lesson a day. A lesson can span for a couple days. So then what does that have to do? How do you think about that with your planning? And so we just had a lot of great conversations that we wouldn't have been able to do if we didn't have this small pilot.
Right.
And I think oftentimes that could potentially cause more negative experiences for teachers if you don't take your time to roll it out in a slower pace.
Right, a real thoughtful pace.
Exactly, yeah, and thoughtful is probably the better word to use for that. Just because I think sometimes, and especially if in our case, we were kind of stuck where we got to do something quick, but then when you think to jump into it, and then teachers, this is a mess, I can't do this, we need supports, we don't have this, we don't have that. So I'm really happy the way that we have decided to kind of hold the brakes, and we're going to give the supports that are needed as they go along.
And because much of that is, as you've talked about, you have to figure it out as you go along.
Exactly.
And so your pilot group is figuring out, they know they're the pilot group, they know that's their job to figure it out as they go along. So I think there's less frustration about that because they're expecting it. And then they'll have the watch outs, you know, watch out for this.
Exactly.
To be able to pass that advice on to everyone else.
Exactly. And I also think it's important to note, we're also thinking about subgroups of students. So a lot of the conversations that we're having now are, okay, so is this working for our ELL learners? And what do we need to provide and support with this? And so we're reaching out to our various different other departments to help us with different supports. So those are the other types of conversations that we're able to kind of do in a smaller group. So then when we have additional teachers coming on board, we'll have some answers for them.
Well, very interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to take a little break now, but be sure to come back for our next guest.
When I was your age, I was just like you, fascinated by stars. But now I get to search for life in the universe. And who knows, maybe life is looking for us too.
So we're like aliens to them?
Yeah. Does anyone want to be a scientist now?
I do.
Awesome. We need more girls in STEM.
Maybe we can find aliens.
In Red Clay, there's more to being a school nurse than just giving out Band-Aids. Sure, we help prevent the spread of flu and other diseases, but did you also know that we work with physicians to coordinate care? We administer medication and manage chronic disease. We coordinate sports physicals and provide education to students, staff, and communities. We deal with stomach aches, brains, and nosebleeds. We conduct screenings for hearing, vision, and so much more. Plus, we document it all. And sure, we give out the occasional Band-Aid or two as well. Red Clay Nurses, keeping your kids healthy is what we do best.
Welcome back as we continue our discussion about literacy and the importance of literacy here at Red Clay. And who better to talk about how kids learn to read and how kids learn to be literate than one of our star elementary teachers, Miss Tory Curtis from Cook Elementary School, who is a former Red Clay Teacher of the Year. So join me in welcoming Tory. Oh, thank you so much for coming on to the show. So we're ready to talk about literacy skills, and we know that we want kids to be constantly improving, and so we are constantly improving the way we teach. And so what changes have there been lately in terms of literacy skills and how we teach literacy?
Absolutely. We know how important literacy is for our students. And I would say the biggest change this year or push is the fact that we no longer teach our skills in isolation. Our students want the books and they're excited to get them. So when they open up the book, our skills are being taught within that, in the context. One of the wonderful things about this is students can then watch how published authors take their ideas and turn them into wonderful, beautifully written pieces. Our students are also able to analyze the way that authors really portray and set up those key ideas, and then the readers can say, oh, I can turn that into my own skill as a writer. Because we know the literacy and the writing, they're connected. So it's great to see those things go together. Another change that I would say is the way that we teach our vocabulary. The development of children's vocabulary we know is really important, and we see that our students need the explicit instruction of the vocab. So we don't pre-teach the word where we show the word. We open up the book. We know the words come to life on the pages, so they open up the book and they're able to see the word in context. We as a teacher can provide the visuals for it. Then we can define it. They get to have a discussion about the words. Oh, I can connect to that word, or I've seen that word part before, and in turn their vocabulary grows, which is exciting to see.
Oh yes, and it's so much more interesting than here's a list of vocabulary words that you have to memorize. It's so much more interesting to be able to tell the story or to retell the story and use some of those words.
Absolutely. It's also really meaningful for the students to hear their peers talk about the word. So, oh, that word reminds me of, and share their connection, especially for our students that may not have a huge background information. By listening to their peers that may have some of those experiences, they can in turn build their own background knowledge, which we know is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very interesting, very interesting. So you're doing those kinds of things a little bit differently now, and when you talk about the books, is that new materials?
It is. So this year across the district, grades 4 and 5 are using the Ready Gen curriculum. And by far the best part of the Ready Gen curriculum is we are using real books. So
not a reader.
No. Of course, it's accessible online if students would like to. When they go home and their families would like to look at the book, their family can look at it online. But every student is given a beautiful book with a colored cover to it, and they really treasure that. It's important to them. They can put sticky notes in the margin, or they can turn to a friend and say, oh, look at this part, or I can relate to this character, which is really meaningful.
And it's so much more authentic. I mean, my love of libraries, that you walk into a library and you don't see readers, you see individual books.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, oh, I'm reading real things.
The other thing that's interesting with this new curriculum is the rigor is present. It is there, and we know that we have high expectations for our students, and the state tests have high expectations for our students. So in a typical 5th grade book, we might read a chapter, and there are a lot of pages in that chapter. For some of our students reading these chapter books, it's the first time they've ever finished a chapter book. But the wonderful thing about the curriculum is it gives me as a teacher time to model the skill for them. So I think aloud, I kind of interact with the text while they watch me, and then because of the length, I'm able to then give them the rest of the chapter, and they in turn have to interact with it. We talk about grappling with the text. Students should have the opportunity to do that. It takes time. They have to, work through it and figure out, oh, I understand this, but I don't really understand that, and what do I do with that? And I feel like this curriculum does a nice job with that, allowing both the teacher model and time for the students to interact independently, which is nice.
And I like the point that you made about grappling with the text, that not everything is easy.
No.
And, you know, not anything, you know, anything that we will ever do is easy. And so, right, to teach them how to deal with some adversity, some challenge is a really important lesson, that we build that competence and confidence that they can do that.
That they absolutely,
Yeah.
and it does need to be modeled for them. We certainly need to make sure that we teach them how to do
And
that.
hence your read aloud with your modeling, oh, well, I'm not really sure what that word means, but I think it might mean this because look at that whole sentence and look at the picture on the
Yes.
page. That's where I'm getting my clues.
Absolutely.
And then they hear how you think about it, and they can think about it that way and extend it to make it personal for them.
Absolutely.
So,
it does
yeah.
think there's a lot of opportunity as well for the students to talk. So as adults, we love a book club, or we love, time to talk. I want to share a good book with you, and you want to hear my, the best read of last year for me. And this curriculum does that as well. There is a lot of opportunity for the students to talk about the book and say, oh, I don't like that character. I wouldn't be friends with her. Or, oh, I would gravitate towards that character because of these qualities or these things that he or she said. And that's what we want, to develop that love of learning, but love of reading. We know that reading gives us new information, but it's pleasurable and it's exciting for us. So,
and I think that's a great point too, that turn and talk
yes,
is,
absolutely.
is an important aspect. And of course then they're developing their language skills, they're developing their ability to express themselves and to let other people know what they think, because that's important to being a successful person as well, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So what can parents do? I'm sure every parent out there wants their child to be a successfully literate in speaking and writing and reading and listening. And so what can parents do to help that process along?
We get that question a lot as teachers. What can we do? Because our parents want to support their child. And the one thing I always say is help to develop the love of reading. So your child comes home and they love sports, show them sports in literature. Or your child comes home and they're overhearing the news and they're asking you about a current event that they're seeing, direct them to the newspaper or a nonfiction article. Show them the connection that we don't have to hop on our phone and watch a video to get information. Information is available to us in print, and building that is really important. The other thing, in our class we talk about, lovingly refer to it as being a word nerd. And so we know that students' development of language and vocabulary is extremely important. So making your child aware of words. So you come across a word like biome, and you ask them, do you know any other words that have that bio into it? And they might say, oh, antibiotic or biology. And they say, I know biology, I know what that means. And then show them the connection or the morphological links between words. And that builds, it takes one word and it builds it out into a web. And that's really what we want the students to do, to see the connection between the meanings in words.
Exactly, because those are your clues when you come across a word you don't know, right?
Absolutely.
That's the way you think about it.
Journaling them can also be a really great idea. So let's say parents have a journal and kids have a journal, and they write down words that make them laugh, words that have a sad or a scary connotation to them. Kind of organizing or grouping words, keeping the conversation going, I think is a great idea at home.
Oh, so those are some great strategies there. Something that interests them, find a book about it, or a current event, find an article about it. And I think we have several resources for that. Newsela, NEWS, ELA has all kinds of things that and current events that parents can look up, that they could find different reading levels so that they could find one close to what their child can really read. And we have the MyOn service that has a lot of nonfiction books in it, as well as, of course, the books that they're reading in school.
Sure, and all of that is accessible through the Clever
and then
app.
All through the Clever app,
great.
right? And then your idea about journals, about I think journals can be intimidating for some people, but I love your idea of just scary words, just words that make me giggle. That's not intimidating. Like writing a journal entry might be intimidating for me, but but not just writing down a word that makes me laugh.
If I asked my 5th graders to journal something with a pen, they would kind of look at me out of the corner of their eye. But if I asked them to create a digital journal, you would see them hop right on. So that could be another alternative as well. The kids are very savvy, and they understand the technology, and they know where to pull the resources. So a digital journal, I see my students doing that for math and for reading, which is really neat to see.
Yes, that really is nice to see. Well, Tory, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us that, feet on the ground look at literacy and how it's working in our schools today with this new material and what parents can do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would like to thank all of our guests today for taking time out of their busy schedules to be here with us. And I want to thank you for tuning in to Red Clay this month. I hope to see you next month.